Now that our holes are punched, we're going to start to sew our signatures together, and you can start from the front to the back. I like to go from the back to the front, and you're going to choose this bottom hole here, and you're going to go in from the outside first, through that hole there, and then we're just going to follow the holes in and out, all the way up, and we're going to leave ourselves about 3 or 4 inches of slack here at the end so we can tie off when we come back around. So coming back out, inside to out, we'll pull it tight, but not too tight to pull this through. There we go. And then you'll notice that these holes are a little bit closer together, and that's to nest these tapes right in between. And so we're going to kind of sandwich that in between and do our next hole. And when we pull that tight, that'll keep that tape nice and secure. And that's going to bridge across all the signatures to help give some of that structure. It's going to keep our signatures and our text block some solidity. I'm going to go to the next hole and back out again, get our next tape ready. Place that there. And again, when we pull that tight, you'll see that'll just anchor that tape right across. And the next time around will be a little bit easier. All right. You can just go all the way up. And then once we get to the top, we're going to come back down on the next signature. Place that tape there. Try not to stab yourself when you're pushing through. All right. I'm going to come back out. And so this is the top hole here. And that will mean that our next in is going to be on the next signature. And I'm just always checking my numbers. 122, 123, perfect. And then we're going to go in at the top here. Pull that nice and tight. Get those two signatures snug against each other. Doesn't have to be terribly tight, but you don't want it loose either. There is such a thing as over-tightening, but I think you're more likely to be too loose than be too tight. You can see how once the tapes are kind of in place, they hold themselves, and it doesn't take 3 hands to do it like it does on that first signature. All right, once we get to the bottom of this second signature, we'll need to tie off to that loose end that we left at the bottom of the first signature. And the knot that you need to do there can be, you can try and get fancy. I like to just do a square knot, tried and true, and very secure. So if you don't know a square knot, you do an over-under, and then you just reverse that over-under the opposite way. Whichever one you passed over the first time, you pass under the second time. All right. I might put a link to a square knot diagram in the notes of the video, just in case. That's one thing Boy Scouts is good for, is teaching you all your knots. Oh no. If you're having trouble with getting your needle to go through the entire signature, it might mean that your pages are misaligned. And so give them a quick jog, stack them up there, get those going again. You might also just, wiggle your awl through, and there we go. Now we're aligned again. Now my needle will go through a lot better. It was catching on that innermost page and wasn't going all the way through. All right, we'll feed that like that. Nice and taut. In and out, all the way up again. And then once we get to the top, I'll show you how to connect this signature not only to the signature that's coming next, but also to the one below it. So I just want all of these to get connected by this thread, and then we're also going to reinforce that with some mull and some tape. So this is going to be a very solid text block that should hold together for a very, very, very long time. There we go. In and out. And you will see the thread in the text block when you are all finished, but that, I think, adds to the charm. Gets hidden a little bit in the crease there, but yeah, it's kind of one of the fun earmarks of a handbound book. All right, we're just making sure that's all tight, and so I'm noticing this is a little loose at the bottom, so I'm just gonna give it a little tug here and a little tug here. And see, that's taking up some of the slack that I left at the bottom, and now I can pull that all the way through. And that helps me to have a little bit tighter of a signature there. I like that. There we go. Now, these two initial signatures that we just had a loop that's coming from the bottom to the second one, but you see this third one's kind of floating free here. So we want to connect this third one back to, the rest of the text block here. So we're just going to take our needle and go right underneath there. And now that's going to loop that under there and connect this third signature back to that group of two there. And then so we're going to go under those and then just one more. Oh, it was going to look so nice. There we go. All right, we'll pull that through. And see, now that third signature isn't flopping in the wind anymore, and now it's ready to go up to the fourth signature. We got page 90, page 91, and it all just kind of flows like this until you get back all the way to the end, or the beginning in my case, because I went back to front. See, there's my problem. I've got this middle signature that came floating away. Let's put that back. There we go. Now they're all back together. Pull that nice and taut. And on, in and out, all the way back down to the bottom. And we'll do the same thing that we did at the top here. Once we get to the bottom, we'll loop underneath the signature below before continuing on to add the signature on top. Again, I want to make sure all these signatures are connected, strong, taut, if not tight, with the thread. And always, always, always going on the outside of these tapes. If you miss a tape, it is possible to pull out some slack and feed that tape back underneath that loop. You want that tape to be underneath those loops of string, and you can kind of give them a little bit of a, oh boy, dangerous, a little bit of a tug. And if you tug too hard, that tape can come all the way out, and it's very difficult to feed it back in. Again, possible, but not fun. And you'll see here I've got a tape that tucked itself underneath that signature, and I could blindly keep going. Make sure it's, there we go. So let's pull a little bit of my slack through. There we go. All right, now that we've got to the bottom, again, we've got kind of this signature is floating free, and we don't want that. So we're going to tuck it underneath the next two signatures, between the two signatures below it, like so. Loop that around there just to kind of make a semi-knot. And what's also fun is if you still have that little tail there, I like to tuck that in there because where else is it going to go? Otherwise it's just floating around looking messy. So tucking that extra little tail through those loops just adds one little extra piece of structure in there. All right, we got 74, 75. Back on up through that bottom hole. And at some point, I will run out of length of this thread. If you have a longer text block, it might take you, 3, 4, 5 lengths of thread with that wingspan that I talked about earlier. And it's pretty simple to just add one length of thread onto the other. And I'll show you how to do that as soon as I run out. I'm coming to the end of my rope, so to speak, here. And really the way to bind them together is with a square knot. And you want to make sure you're doing that on the outside of your text block. So you don't want to bind or tie your threads together on the inside here where it can be seen. You want that knot to be on the outside, the spine side, as it were. We're almost there, but I think I can do a few more ins and outs before I do that, get another piece of length of string here, thread. So underneath, don't forget, it's easy to forget. Get excited, get onto the next signature, and then you've got some signatures that aren't properly secured to the one below. 54, 55. Coming to the end of my rope. Let's see how many more I can get before I have to tie off. And I'll only need one more thread to get through the rest of my signatures. I think it looks like I've only got 2 left. There we go. And you can really see how the tapes are starting to kind of form that backbone of the text block. And I've been going a little too fast. I noticed that I've got some slack in this middle one, so I'm going to see if I can take that up. Oh no, I see what I did. I actually sewed through the tape, which isn't the worst thing in the world. but it does mean that that tape won't be able to kind of slide forward and in and out. It's going to be stuck exactly in that position, whereas these other ones are a little bit more free-floating. So we're not going to be able to take up that slack, but I'll show you in a later step how kind of the pressing and the gluing can help make up for that. We're going to just try and find that hole again because, there we go. I was playing with the signature and the papers got kind of misaligned, and that means your holes aren't going to be right on top of each other, and when that happens it's a little bit harder to slide that needle all the way through. Okay, so I have plenty of thread here to do a few more, but I'm going to actually get a new piece of string, new length of thread, also doing full wingspan, and then I'm going to use my beeswax to get it to lie flat and also protect it. So run that through. See how it's starting to curl up, and once I do that, take it through the beeswax a few times, it will stop doing that. It'll be a lot more rigid, easier to thread through the eye of the needle, and won't bind up on me when I'm trying to take it through those holes in the signatures. Okay, almost done with this length here. And when I've done that, I can make a square knot as close as I can to this knot here, because what I'm going to want to do is I want that knot to lie on the outside of this tape before I go into the next one. So let's do that. If I make this knot way up here, then it's going to actually end up inside my signature further in. So I want this to be all the way nested, all the way down here. Let's do that. Get that nice and tight down there. And then reverse my over-unders. Nice and tight, all the way close to where it exited there. And I can cut off these extra bits at the end. You can do that right now, or I can kind of just leave them. My scissors are far away, so I'm going to leave those until the very end. And keep going. So now I've got a new length of thread secured to my old one. That knot is going to go on the outside of this tape before I go back in, and no one will ever know. And back out. And what do I need to do? I need to secure this one to the two signatures below. Got a lot of loose ends here. They're starting to clutter things up. Wrapping that around. It's not quite a knot, just a loop. Tightens things up there. Then in the bottom here, just two more this signature and then one more to go on top of it. And then we'll tie off and be done binding our text block. We'll move on to gluing our text block. In theory, you wouldn't even need to glue it. You could just make do with the sewing. The pages will have been bound together and will read like a book. The gluing just adds a little bit more extra structure and strength. These tapes are very, very nice for also helping to keep the center parts of the book attached to each other, connected in such a way, because we're not looping down each time when we're coming out here. Different stitches will do that. It's possible to do stitches where you don't use these tapes at all, but every signature will kind of loop down to the one below it with using the thread only. It's a little bit fancier. Some people will even use colored thread and leave the stitching exposed, won't even put a spine on the book because they're so proud of the stitching. And let the handiwork show on purpose. We're going to put a cover over ours, so if you do mess up, that's all right. Nobody will ever know. All right. I'm going to loop under there. All right, we're down to our final and first signature. I'm gonna take up a little bit of slack here. Use my needle to do it. There we go. Oh yeah, satisfying. That's why I like to go back to front. When we get to the bottom, we're just going to tie off to the signature below, tuck in the thread that's kind of outstanding, trim off all the pieces that are floating around. This piece keeps getting caught up in my loops that come after it. It's just more structure, more connection from that bottom to the top. All right, so I've got a little bit hanging out here. We want to secure this final signature to the one below it in the same way we've done before. But a loop won't do it. We've got to tie that in a knot. So we've got to do that a couple times. And then what you can also do is actually kind of continue that chain down a few times. And I don't worry terribly much about tying the most secure knot in the world, because I know my glue is going to come around and make it so that this thread will not unravel itself. Oh no, what have I done? I'm accidentally making quite a knot. There we go. So if you see what I'm doing, I am just going to the next signature down, doing my loop through, and then kind of tucking back through that. It's not quite a knot, but if you do that enough times, no amount of tugging is going to unravel that. Oh, there we go. So I went through about 3-4 times. You can go all the way down if you like, but yeah, I feel pretty secure there. I'm going to leave a little bit of a tail, and then when I glue it down, that tail is going to come back out through the rest. let me go get my scissors, trim this off. Okay. Leaving a tail, perfectly fine. I'm going to glue that down. This one I'm going to trim, leave a little tail. Again, those are going to just be glued down. And there's my text block. Now, you see this has a lot of play here. This one is going to come down. What I want to make sure you do is you grab both ends if you're trying to center these, because if you pull too hard, you can pull it all the way through. That one's pretty centered. That one's pretty good. But this one, oh, see what I did? I didn't follow my own advice. Hold with both ends as you're centering that. Give the signature a bit of a squeeze. And that is a text block. Next we'll glue it, and then we'll case it.